I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Give me another verse, somebody.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the beautiful, historic Lincoln Theater. We welcome you to the City of Columbus's Dr. Martin Luther King 2015 celebration. Please take your seats and turn your attention to the stage as our program is about to begin.
Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination. And let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge, to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation. And I want to thank God once more for allowing me to be here with you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you are able, please rise for the singing of Lift Every Voice and Sing, the Black National Anthem.
Ring our God, where we met thee. Bless our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath our hand, make me forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. True to our God, true to our native
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause for our vocalist, SEHRI Wycliffe, and for the beautiful sounds of Urban Strains.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mariah Obayemi. I am a 14-year-old student at Columbus City Preparatory School for Girls, and today I'll be speaking on A Hope for Change. Everybody has a vision to change the world. Your dream can be as big as Dr. Martin Luther King's, moving the congregations, touching the lives of every single person in a massive crowd. Your dream can be as small as desiring to put up streetlights or getting a recycling center on your street corner. No matter how big of an ambition or how small, it's still a change you hope to see. Give us the ballot. A hope for change is a statement that rings heavily in my ears. It reminds me of when I was a little girl, about the age of 8, and after watching little pageant shows, I would stand in front of my mirror, practice my walk, practice my speech. In my speech, I would always say the same thing. I wish for women to be as important as men, and I wish for more money. I was little at the time, so forgive me, but I didn't really understand what I was saying. Now that I'm a bit older and wiser, I understand that I'm a smart little girl. I understand what I stood for. I understand that at a young age, women in TV shows were often in the background, always playing the supportive roles. I knew I didn't just want to be in the background. I knew I wanted to change the way women were viewed in society. And I knew that change had to start with me. Give us the ballot, a hope for change, so that I can see women get the same social rights as men. Give us the ballot, so that I can see the wage gaps between gender and classes get smaller. Give us the ballot, a hope for change, so that I can see my generation thrive. Give us the ballot, a hope for change, so that I don't see the next generation fall. Now, I've raised a point by saying, give us the ballot, so that I can see my generation thrive. Let's think on that for a second. This is my generation, the generation that I am growing up with, the generation in which my life is rooted. If I am so deeply engrossed in this generation, and this generation is on the brink of falling, then don't you think that I'm falling with it. I would much rather be part of a generation that grows and thrives and has a bigger percentage of people rising and graduating than be in a generation associated with hip-hop's decline. I would much rather see my brothers and sisters looking up to presidents instead of looking up to jail ceilings. When I say, give us the ballot, I'm saying give us an inspiration. I'm saying give us the hope that we so desperately need so that we can tap into our full potentials. I'm saying give us a hope for change. In the words of Dr. King, we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brianna Walker. I am 13 years old in the 7th grade and currently attending Columbus City Preparatory School for Girls. The title of my oration is The 3 Best Things in Life. Over this past summer, my family took a trip to Atlanta, Georgia, the home of social change as well as the civil rights movement. The first thing that caught my eye was the number of young adults of all colors at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. If Atlanta is the home, Ebenezer is the cradle. During our walk around the church, I turned to my father and asked, why do so many people of color bring their children to the church? The answer is the reason I stand before you today, passing the baton. At the time, I thought, that's it? Is he teaching me something, or was I just too young to understand? After a few minutes, I got that look on my face, and we all know that look. The one your dog gets when they just don't understand what you're trying to say. I tilted my head, and with my best puppy dog eyes, I asked, passing the baton? Now, I was told that as a baby in the Lord, we are given milk until such time we are ready for meat. Was that it? Did my father still see me as a baby? Have I not shown him in the past that I was a young lady? A short time later, I found myself standing in front of the altar, waiting for my mother to snap a picture or two. At that very moment, my father whispered in my ear, our part of the fight is over. I now pass the baton to you, the next generation that will bring about a new wave of social change. For the first time, my father was giving me meat, and at the moment I knew he also saw in me a hope for change. Over the next few minutes, please allow me to share with you my hopes for change. I hope for a time where I no longer have to sit down at the dinner table and hear about another young black male that has been shot by the police. I hope for a time that I can go onto the internet and not read about someone in a position of power talking poorly about the president or his children based on nothing more than the color of their skin. I hope that one day one of you sitting here in this room will stand up and say, this is not right, and make it easier for the next person to say no. It is said that a person only needs 3 things to be truly happy in life. For someone to love, something to do, and something to hope for. But hope without work is only a wish. So all of my hopes for change start in just one place, the ballot box. Thomas Peterson was the first black man to vote under the 15th Amendment. That was in 1870. Today, some people say that more young people of color vote for the next American Idol than the President of the United States. They have taken your eyes off of the prize. I don't think this is what we wanted when we stated, give us the ballot, a hope for change. The only ballot we must take is the electoral ballot. The ballot is the new front of the battle for social change. The enemy has already gotten the jump on us by using things like ID cards to vote, a direct shot at the poor and elderly. In states with thousands of eligible black voters, they can no longer present college IDs to vote, but a license for a concealed handgun is just fine. In southern states, they are taking away voting polls on bus routes. Again, another shot at the poor. Early voting is being taken away, making it harder for working families to vote. In closing, I would like to say 2 things. First, to the brothers. I may be willing to follow, but first you have to show me you can lead. remember, no well-behaved woman seldom made history. So, ladies and gentlemen, now it's my turn to whisper into your ear. It's time to watch me misbehave.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Councilmember Eileen Paley and Napoleon Bell, Executive Director of the Community Relations Commission.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
I have to follow that. I mean, really? I am Councilmember Eileen Paley, and I chair the committee for the Community Relations Division for the City of Columbus and for City Council. I want to welcome you all to this wonderful occasion on behalf of City Council. Weren't those urban strings wonderful? And how about Miss Whitcliffe? And I don't know, I know I was in an oratorical competition when I was in 6th grade, and they were, we didn't even come close to that. I know that. And while we're showing our appreciation, let's salute Director Bell and his team from the Community Relations Commission, including our great Community Relations Commissioners down here, for their hard work every year for the March and for this wonderful program. Dr. King's legacy is here in our city and is all-encompassing. We are a diverse and a welcoming city. We're open and smart, and we work hard for you every day. Look around you. We have a full house tonight because this is what puts the us into Columbus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Paley, for your support throughout these years with our office. And today's celebration, though, is brought to you by a cross-section of the community that comes together to deliver an experience that helps us not only reflect on our past, but also inspires us to move forward to continue to create Dr. King's vision of a beloved community. I want to take a minute, though, to thank everyone who made it possible, though. Our great partners, as you would see up on the our great partners that provided us guidance, space, and transportation, our sponsors, who also gave of their time and their treasure, and our volunteers, many of those who come back every year and after year, to the many talented artists who shared their gifts with us through word and song. We say thank you. Many of you, though, who participated in today's symbolic march, honoring those who sacrificed and struggled through much more than just a cold January day. You marched across the Cultural Wall Bridge by symbolizing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where marchers were beaten in Selma, Alabama. One of the hallmark programs of our commission is our annual Civil Rights Heritage Tour. Every year during spring break, 50 people made up of students, activists, community leaders, and residents, young and seasoned, which we call today's Freedom Riders, joined us to retrace the steps of civil rights heroes and sheroes. We traveled from Columbus to Cincinnati, Atlanta, Tuskegee, Selma, Montgomery, Birmingham, and Memphis, Tennessee in 5 days. It is one experience to read about the movement in a book and a whole different experience to touch and feel the roller coaster of emotions by being in the exact location of the bomb that killed 4 little girls at the 16th Street Baptist Church, the site where Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, and the site where the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. We do invite each of you to visit our website to learn more, but make sure you get registered to come experience the Civil Rights Tour with us April 7th through the 11th of this year. Happy birthday, Dr. King.
Buenas noches. My name is Joel Diaz. I am proud to serve as the chair of the Friends of the Community Relations Commission for the City of Columbus. And I am, on behalf of the Friends of the CRC, would like to welcome you all to tonight's program and thank you for being a part of Dr. King's legacy. We are a nonprofit organization whose focus is to build awareness and the resources to allow the Community Relations Commission to do the work that it does and provide programs of this nature. So thank you all for being here tonight and making tonight possible. It is my honor tonight to introduce City Council President Andrew Ginther, a strong leader in our community and a true visionary for the City of Columbus. Please join me in giving him a round of applause to welcome him.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight on such a special day in our city and throughout our history. Thrilled to be with you tonight. I want to recognize a couple of my colleagues who I serve with on Columbus City Council. Council members Shannon Harden, Councilmember Michelle Mills, and as our newest Councilmember DIAZ Page in the house. There she is. And I know Councilmember Priscilla Tyson marched with us tonight. I'm not sure if she's still here, but give her a round of applause anyway. I know Councilmember Klein was with us, and you've already heard from our great chair, Eileen Paley. It's wonderful to be with you for this special celebration in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And let me be the first to extend a welcome to an American icon, Mr. Julian Bond. Welcome to the City of Columbus. The mayor's got the tough job of introducing him. I have the tough job of introducing the mayor, and it is my true pleasure to do that. Before I bring him up here, I want to share just how inspirational this day has been to me. Although this is Dr. King's Day, Columbus has been commemorating his legacy throughout celebrations and gatherings since the new year began. I've had the pleasure of joining many of you all around Columbus at union halls, community centers, schools, and places of worship. It underscores the way we approach celebrations, challenges, and opportunities in this great city. We come together, set aside our differences, and work hand in hand to build a brighter future for all of our children. And this new location for the King Day March and program is certainly a fitting place to honor Dr. King and remember his life. I feel as if the community is bringing the King Day celebrations home here in the King-Lincoln District. Those seats comfortable? Good, you paid for them. You invested millions of dollars, and the mayor and I and others on your behalf invested in restoring this magnificent theater. I think this is a good investment for the City of Columbus. And it reflects the great tradition and contributions that African Americans have made to our amazing city. Our city is better because the neighborhood that bears Dr. King's name is thriving. And the main reason for this success of this neighborhood and so many other neighborhoods throughout our great city is because of the leadership of my friend and partner in service to this great city, Mayor Michael B. Coleman. Just one second. I got a few more things. Since taking office in 2000, Mayor Coleman has built Columbus's reputation as one of the best cities in the nation by investing in stronger, safer neighborhoods, creating jobs, and maintaining a high quality of life. Mayor Coleman is the first African American and the longest serving mayor in Columbus's history. He's also the third longest serving mayor in the country and the longest serving African American mayor among major U.S. cities. In November of last year, Mayor Coleman was honored as a power broker of the Ebony Power 100, Ebony Magazine's list of the most influential and intriguing African Americans in America. And Matt Bai of Yahoo News just wrote, "You could make a compelling case that Columbus's mayor for the last 14 years, Michael Coleman, is the best big city mayor in the country. Rather than rail against Republicans in the State House or the big banks that employ a lot of his residents, as some Washington Democrats like to, Coleman seems to focus relentlessly on the kind of urban renewal that will make Columbus attractive to the next generation." Ladies and gentlemen, please join me. Stand and welcome to the stage Columbus's longest-serving, most successful mayor in our city's history, Mayor Michael B. Coleman.
Thank you so much. Wow, Andy, that was something else. You act like you want to be mayor. Guess what? I want you to be mayor. You know, today's a fabulous day, and I want to welcome you to the Lincoln Theater. And I want you to remind yourselves what this theater looked like not long ago. We saved it from the wrecking ball. It was falling apart. It was in a neighborhood that had been neglected for decades upon decades. And the city stepped in, we acquired it, renovated it. And we renovated it so that we can have events like this in what we determined then as the new King Lincoln District. Between the King Arts Complex and the Lincoln Theater, we felt we had a synergy to rebuild the community. And so we started with this block, this few blocks in this area here. And then this past summer, we opened up the Long Street Bridge. And Julian, the Long Street Bridge is this bridge right to our west. And the history is brief. I'll be brief. But a long time ago, some engineers built a highway separating the African American community from the rest of the city, choked it off. And so we set about the process of building what we call a cap. And on that bridge, we built a cultural wall as well. And that cultural wall represents those who made significant contributions to this neighborhood, to the African American community. So when we built that bridge, we're trying to fix the segregation of the past and the separation of the past to unify the city in a big way. So Julian Bond, truly, as Andy Ginther said, an American icon. Civil rights leader, a professor, a writer, first president of the Southern Poverty Law Center, elected to 4 terms. That's a long time, because I know that's a long time. Georgia House of Representatives, 6 terms to the Georgia Senate. Wow. Chairman of the NAACP for many years. In 1960, he co-founded the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. During his day, he traveled back in those early days of the 60s and 70s. He traveled throughout the South to get people the right to vote, to speak up, marched. And he's from Morehouse College. He went to Morehouse College. Shannon Hardin went to Morehouse College. But you know, you never know how people impact you until years later. You never know how they inspired you. You never know how they impact you until years later. And so I saw Julian Bond a few years ago. We spoke. I'm sure he didn't remember. But back in 1980, when I was a young lawyer trying to find my way, knowing that someday I was going to go in politics somehow, some way, Julian Bond spoke in this neighborhood. He spoke at the neighborhood house. And it was a lot of young that are now not so young, African Americans. And he stood and charged us up about the right to vote. And I was the kind of guy back then that I would carry a notebook and I would write down speeches. I would collect information, ideas, political strategies, because I intended to use it for myself one day. And I remember that day so well because there were 200 or 300 people on a hot summer day, sweating, listening to Julian Bond charge us up. I remember writing down every word of his speech, and I should have brought it with me today. I could have given it this evening. But I showed Shannon Hardin this speech book that I have, and it's in there today. But it inspired me. It inspired me to do bigger and better things. That moment, Julian Bond, was important to me. And you inspired me to do other things in life. And I appreciate that. You never knew that. But here we are many years later in this renovated theater that we built to talk to Columbus again. I welcome this great man, this great icon, someone that we love in Columbus, but also around this nation, the great Julian Bond.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much. I wish I had that speech again. Thank you so much for those kind words. It's very gracious of you. It's just a great pleasure to be in Columbus again. I've been here a couple of times, more than once or twice. I'm glad to be back here, and particularly glad to be in this beautiful, beautiful building. You don't see buildings like this every day. It's a great, great place to be, and I'm happy to be part of these King celebrations. And when I got the invitation to come, I thought, why are they asking me? I said, probably it's because the people in Columbus know about the close, intimate relationship that Dr. King and I had. And if you don't know about it, I'm going to tell you about it right now. Now, I know there are people in here who would say, I was a student of Dr. King. Dr. King only taught one time, only taught one class, only 8 people in the class. I'm one of the 8. So I'm one of 8 people in the whole world, who can say I was a student of Dr. King. Now, I wish I could tell you that I had taken extensive notes in the class, and I kept those notes until today, but I didn't do that. I wish I could tell you I had the smart to write down everything that he'd said, to get these pearls of wisdom that fell from the lips of this marvelous, marvelous man. I wish I could tell you that, but I remember almost nothing that passed between teacher and student in that class. I have no memory of it at all. But I do remember that one day when class was over, he and I were walking across the beautiful, beautiful Morehouse College campus. And you know what they say about Morehouse men. You can always tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much. So I'm walking across the Morehouse campus with Dr. King, and I said to him, I said, Doc, his friends called him Doc. I said, Doc, how are you doing? He said, Julian, I'm not doing well. He said, unemployment is high, racism is everywhere, segregation seems immovable. I feel awful, he said. I have a nightmare. I said, no, Doc, turn that around. Try I have a dream. And well, I'm glad that in introducing me, the mayor mentioned that I served in both the Georgia House and the Georgia Senate. And when I moved from the House to the Senate, the IQ went up in both places. Now, I want to talk about the racial picture in America, which really has improved remarkably in my lifetime, so much so that a black man is in the White House today, and a statue of Martin Luther King sits on the Washington Mall. But Barack Obama's election and re-election was a testament to one man's singular abilities and not to racial nirvana across the land. His victory didn't herald a post-civil rights America, didn't mean that race had been vanquished, couldn't eliminate structural inequity or racist attitude. Indeed, there's some evidence that it fomented them. Obama is to the Tea Party that the moon is to werewolves. Now, there are those people who say that race is history, and they really have it backward. History is race. Because the word America, scrambled after all, spells I am race. And America is race, from its symbolism to its substance, from its founding by slaveholders to its rending by the Civil War, from Johnny Reb to Jim Crow, from the Ku Klux Klan to Katrina, from Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin to Michael Brown. Now today, or rather this year, is the last year of the sesquicentennial of the Civil War, the war that claimed more lives than all other wars combined in our nation's history. We live in this war's legacy and its cause every day. But we don't have to go back to slavery, as central as it is to our past and our present. The Social Security Act, signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to cite one example, exempted farm workers and domestics, rendering 65% of black people ineligible. Similarly, Title III of the GI Bill, which provided low-interest home loans to veterans, effectively disqualified black veterans. Not coincidentally, just when, as historian Thomas Segru writes, home ownership became an emblem of American citizenship. Because blacks couldn't get regular mortgages, they were forced to buy on contract. The seller then held the deed until it was paid in full. One missed payment meant total forfeit. So-called contract peddlers sold homes at inflated prices and then evicted black families when they couldn't pay. Does all this sound familiar to you? During the recent foreclosure crisis, today's contract peddlers shunted blacks into predatory loans regardless of their credit worthiness. Evidence in the government suits against one bank showed that loan officers called black customers mud people and their subprime products ghetto loans. As William Faulkner taught us, the past is never dead, it's not even the past. Now, we look back on the years between the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 and the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1965 with some pride. Those were the days when politicians from both parties supported the struggle for civil rights. Now they struggle to be civil. Those were the days when banks loaned money to people, and not like these days when the people loan money to the banks. Those were the days when we were powered by our values and not valued for our power. Those were the days when good music was popular and when popular music was good. Those were the days when the president picked the Supreme Court and not the other way around. Those were the days when we had a war on poverty and not a war on the poor. Those were the days when the voters chose their politicians, and not like today, when self-serving gerrymandering and political manipulation allows politicians to choose their own voters. Those were the days when the news media really was fair and balanced, and not just mouthpieces for the misinformed. But those were not the good old days. In those days, the law, the courts, the schools, almost every institution favored whites. This was white supremacy. When the Supreme Court announced in May of 1955, in the second of two Brown decisions, that the white South could make hay slowly in dismantling segregated schools, I was 1 year older than Emmett Till. His murder 3 months after the second Brown decision was much more immediate to me than the court's pronouncements had been. We were nearly the same age when he was killed in Money, Mississippi, for whistling at a white woman. Emmett Till's death terrified me, but in the fall of 1957, a group of black teenagers encouraged me to put that fear aside. These young people, the 9 young women and men who integrated Little Rock Central High School, set a high standard of grace and courage under fire as they dared the mobs that surrounded their school. Here, I thought, this is what I can be if ever the chance comes my way. The chance to test and prove myself did come my way in 1960, as it came to thousands of other black high school and college students across the South, in a mobilization of young black people not duplicated in our country before or since. First through the sit-ins, then in the freedom rides, then in voter registration and political organizing drives in the rural South, we joined an old movement against white supremacy that had deep, strong roots. My first arrest was in Atlanta when I was 20 years old. It was March of 1960, during the Jim Crow era. I had led a group of my fellow students to the segregated cafeteria in the basement of Atlanta City Hall. We passed along the steam table loading our trays, and as first in line, I approached the cashier. Like most Southerners, she was polite, and she told me, "I'm awfully sorry, but this is for City Hall employees only." I said, "You have a big sign outside that says City Hall Cafeteria. The public is welcome." She said, "We don't mean it." And she called the police, and they came and locked us up. Because nearly 200 of us had been arrested that day in various locations around Atlanta, it was decided to try one person for each group, and I was chosen to represent mine. For the first time in my life, I stood before a judge. On either side of me were 2 men I'd never seen before or met before. I quickly understood these were my lawyers. After some back and forth, the judge asked me, "How do you plead?" And I was panic-stricken. On the one hand, I knew I was guilty. A policeman had asked me to leave, and I had refused. But I didn't feel guilty. I knew I had a right to eat in that tax-supported cafeteria, and any law that said I couldn't was no law at all. I looked to my left, where the elder of my 2 lawyers was standing. He was the dean of black lawyers in Georgia. He had risked his life and limb for nearly 50 years to represent black people in courthouses in small towns where he dare not spend the night. Now, nearly in his dotage, he was asleep on his feet. I turned frantically to the lawyer on my right, who said in a whisper, Not guilty, you fool. And I had the presence of mind to drop those last two words, or I wouldn't be standing here now. Now, Dr. King was the most famous. He was the best known of the modern movement's personalities, but we should remember this was a people's movement. Most of those who made the movement were not famous. They were the faceless. They weren't the noted. They were the nameless. The marchers with tired feet. The protesters beaten back by fire hoses and billy clubs. The unknown women and men who risked job and home and life. 2 years ago, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Last year was the 50th anniversary of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And this year, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. As we celebrate these milestones, we celebrate the ordinary women and ordinary men who made the movement mighty. We celebrate Robert and Jeannie Gratz. On the Sunday after Rosa Parks' arrest, Dr. King called his congregation to join the planned one-day boycott. Other black ministers across the city did the same, and so did one white minister, Robert Gratz, who pastored a black Lutheran congregation. Weeks after the 382-day boycott came to a successful end, the Gratz's home was destroyed by a bomb while their family, including their 4-day-old baby, slept. We celebrate Dorothy Counts. She was 15 years old when in September of 1957 she enrolled in an all-white high school in Charlotte, North Carolina. As Dorothy walked to school, the wife of the leader of the White Citizens Council urged the boys to keep her out and the girls to spit on her. She kept on walking. Many people threw rocks at her. Some of them spit on her, so many that her mother said when Dorothy got home, her dress was so wet with spit she could wring it out. We celebrate Hartman Turnbow, a black farmer in Mississippi, the most brutal state of the old Confederacy. I remember him, dressed like the farmer he was in coveralls, boots, and old hat. Mr. Turnbow carried a briefcase. When he opened that briefcase, there's nothing in it but an automatic. In April 1963, Mr. Turnbow went with a group of other black farmers in Holmes County, Mississippi, to register to vote. When the sheriff asked who would be first, nobody moved. Then Mr. Turnbow said, "Me, Hartman Turnbow. I came here to die to vote. I'll be the first." 4 days later, the Klan firebombed his home and fired multiple shots into his living room. Mr. Turnbow fired back. Then the sheriff charged him with arson, accusing him of setting fire to his own uninsured home. We celebrate Fannie Lou Hamer. If Mississippi was the most repressive state, Ms. Hamer was its most heroic freedom fighter. When the movement came to her town of Ruleville in 1962, she was 44 years old and a timekeeper on a plantation. Now, one definition of courage is acting in the face of fear. Ms. Homer's biographer, after noting that people challenged that fear in big ways and small, writes, "If Fannie Lou Hamer felt that fear, she suppressed it or overpowered it eventually with rage. She had much to fear herself, everything from physicians who harmed her and neglected her, to plantation owners who fired shots over her pillow, to politicians who sought to silence her. Ultimately, all these people came to fear her because she would not be silenced, in part because they had no way to silence her. She owed them nothing, and she gave them hell, despite the fear." The movement succeeded in spite of cowards planting bombs in the night, in spite of shots fired in the darkness, in spite of lynch mobs and hooded thugs, in spite, as Dr. King said, the brutality of a dying order shrieking across the land. In its successes, that movement has much to teach us today. As the old freedom song reminds us, ain't but one thing we did wrong, stayed in segregation just a day too long. Ain't but one thing we did right, and that's the day we started to fight. Yesterday's movement succeeded in part because the victims became their own best champions. When Ms. Parks refused to stand up, when Dr. King stood up to preach, mass participation came to the movement for civil rights. Now it falls on us to continue this fight. When we look back on that movement from today, we now see a very different view of the events and personalities of the period. Instead of the towering figures of Kennedys and Kings, we now see an army of anonymous women and men. Instead of famous orations made to multitudes, we now see the planning and the work that preceded the triumphant speech. Instead of a series of well-publicized marches and protests, we now see long organizing campaigns and lave and lonely soldiers often working in near solitude. Instead of prayerful petitions for government's deliverance, we now see aggressive demands and the ethic of self-reliance and self-help. We now see our view of the movement's goals was narrow too. Seeking more than the removal of racial segregation, that movement didn't want to be integrated into a burning house. Rather, it wanted to build a better house for everyone. It marched on Washington for freedom and jobs, not for abstract freedom alone. And instead of a sudden and unanticipated upsurge in black activism in Montgomery in 1955, we now see a long and unceasing history of aggressive challenges to white supremacy that began as long ago as slavery time. And instead of a movement that ended in 1968 with the death of Dr. King, we now see continued movement stretching from the ancient past until this moment, with different forms and personalities, in many places and locales, with differing methods and techniques, whose central goal has always been the elimination of restrictions based on race. Now, each of these great three civil rights milestones of the 1960s was followed by tragedy. Less than a month after the 1963 March on Washington, 4 young girls attending Sunday school were killed in the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. As the civil rights community savored the triumph of the passage of the '64 Civil Rights Act, they dealt with tragedy. On June 21, 1964, 3 civil rights workers had gone missing in Mississippi. As authorities searched Mississippi's rivers for the bodies of Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Michael Schwerner, 8 other bodies were found of disappeared black men, including 1 headless torso and 1 body cut in half. The remains of the civil rights workers were found on August 4, 1964. Goodman was 24 years old, Schwerner 24, and Chaney 21. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was signed into law on August 6. 5 days later, the Watts riot broke out in Los Angeles, triggered by a confrontation with the police. When it ended 6 days later, 64 citizens, most of them black, were dead. This exemplifies the freedom struggle in America. Triumph followed by tragedy, victory followed by defeat, hope followed by despair, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. We are such a young nation, so recently removed from slavery, that only my father's generation stands between Julian bond and human bondage. Like many others, including some in this room, I'm the grandson of a slave. My grandfather, James Bond, was born in 1863 in Kentucky. Freedom didn't come for him until the 13th Amendment was ratified in 1865. He and his mother were property, like a horse or a chair. As a young girl, she'd been given away as a wedding present to a new bride. And when that bride became pregnant, her husband, that's my great-grandmother's owner and master, exercised his right to make his wife's slave his mistress. That union produced 2 children, one of them my grandfather. At age 15, barely able to read or write, he hitched his tuition, a steer, to a rope, and walked across Kentucky to Berea College, and the college took him in. Now, he belonged to a transcendent generation of black Americans, a generation born in slavery, a generation freed by the Civil War, a generation determined to make their way as free women and men. Dr. King belonged to another transcendent generation of black Americans, a generation born in segregation, freed from racism restraints by their own efforts, determined to make their way as free women and men. When my grandfather graduated from Berea in 1892, the college asked him to deliver the commencement address. He said then, "The pessimist from his corner looks out on the world of wickedness and sin, and blinded by all that is good or hopeful in the condition and the progress of the human race, bewails the present state of affairs and predicts woeful things for the future. In every cloud he beholds a destructive storm, in every flash of lightning an omen of evil, and in every shadow that falls across his path a lurking foe. But he forgets that the clouds also bring life and hope, that the lightning purifies the atmosphere, that shadow and darkness prepare for sunshine and growth, and that hardships and adversity nerve the race as the individual for greater efforts and grander victories. While we struggle today toward greater efforts and grander victories, we're still being tested by hardships and adversity. The rich have been sitting at the banquet table, and the rest of us have been on the menu. Plutarch warned an imbalance between rich and poor is the oldest and most fatal ailments of all republics. People of color, of course, are much more likely to be poor than rich, and they are worse off than their white counterparts. They are too fragile. The median wealth of white households is 20 times greater than that of black households, and 18 times greater than that of Hispanic households, the largest ratio since these data were first collected a quarter of a century ago. While white households saw their median wealth fall by 16% between 2005 and 2009, it fell by 67% among Hispanic households and 53% among black households at the same time. The median wealth per black Americans is $4,955, below the median wealth per adult in Mexico, China, and Brazil. Black household wealth is just over the median wealth of an adult in Palestine. Almost every social indicator, from birth to death, reflects black-white disparities. Infant mortality rates are 134% higher for blacks. Chances of imprisonment are 370% higher. Rates of death from homicide are 493% higher. Lack of health insurance, 33% more likely. The proportion with a college degree, 53% lower. And the average white American will live almost 4 years longer than the average black American. These ills can't be addressed by an individual or organized charity alone, as noble as these efforts go. It may be helpful to think about it in this way. Two men are sitting by a river, and they see, to their great surprise, a baby come floating by. They jump in the river and they save the child, and to their horror, another baby comes floating down the stream. When that child is pulled to safety, another baby comes along. One man jumps in the river a third time, the other one runs upstream. "Come back," says the man in the water. "We have to save this baby." "You save it," the other man says. "I'm going to find out who's throwing babies in the water, and I'm going to make him stop." Now, I once heard Professor Lonnie Guinier say that racial minorities are like the canaries that miners used to carry to warn them when the underground air was becoming too toxic to breathe. But too many people want to put gas masks on the canaries instead of eliminating the poison in the air. Too many people want to put life preservers on the babies instead of stopping them from being thrown into a treacherous, dangerous flood. The Civil War that freed my grandfather was fought over whether blacks and whites shared a common humanity. Less than 10 years after it ended, the nation chose sides with the losers and agreed to continue black repression for almost 100 years. The freed slaves found their former masters once again controlled their fate. American slavery was a human horror of staggering dimensions, a true crime against humanity. The profits it produced endowed great fortunes and enriched generations, and its dreadful legacy embraces all of us today. 246 years of slavery were followed by 100 years of state-sanctioned discrimination, reinforced by public and private terror, ending only after a major struggle in 1965, 2 years after Barack Obama was born. If you are 50 years old or older, and I see that some of you are, you know, it was my birthday day before yesterday. Let's go on. If you're 50 years old or older, it's only in your lifetime that racial equality before the law became a reality and not before. For only roughly 50 years have all black Americans been granted the full rights of citizens. Only 50 years since legal segregation was ended nationwide. Only 50 years since the right to register and vote was universally guaranteed. Only 50 years since the protections of the law and Constitution were officially extended to everyone. Now we're asked to believe that 200 years of being somebody else's property, followed by 100 years of legal oppression in the South and discrimination in the North, we're asked to believe that that could be wiped away by 5 decades of half-hearted remediation and one black president. We're now asked to believe that despite more than 3 centuries of horror, no permanent damage was done to the oppressors or the oppressed. We're asked to believe that we Americans are now a healed and whole people. As one historian has observed, the greatest impediment to achieving racial equality is the narcotic belief that we already have. The truth is, The Jim Crow may be dead, but racism is alive and well. That's the central fact of life for every non-white American, including the President of the United States. It eclipses income, position, and education. Race trumps them all. So we have work to do. None of it's easy, but we've never wished our way to freedom. Instead, we've always worked our way. Today, we have much more to work with, and we take heart that much has changed. The changes that have come have everything to do with the work of the modern movement for civil rights. But there needs to be a constantly growing and always reviving activist progressive movement across America if we're going to maintain and expand the victories we won and our vision for the country. We can't forget Martin Luther King stood before and with thousands, the people who made this mighty movement what it was. From Jamestown slave pens to Montgomery's boycotted buses, these ordinary women and men labored in obscurity. And from Montgomery forward, they provided the foot soldiers of the Freedom Army. They walked in dignity rather than ride in shame. They faced bombs in Birmingham and mobs in Mississippi. They sat down at lunch counters so others could stand up. They marched and they organized. Now, Dr. King didn't march from Selma to Montgomery by himself. He didn't speak to an empty field at the March on Washington. There were thousands marching with him, and thousands before him, and thousands more who did the dirty work that preceded the triumphant march. The successful strategies of the modern movement for civil rights were litigation, organization, mobilization, and coalition, all aimed at creating a national constituency for civil rights. Sometimes it is the simplest of acts, sitting at a lunch counter, going to a new school, applying for a marriage license, casting a vote. These can challenge the way we think and the way we act. Racial justice, economic equality, world peace, those were the themes that occupied Dr. King's life. They ought to occupy ours today. We have a long and honorable tradition of social justice in this country. It still sends forth the message that when we act together, we can overcome. My slave-born grandfather speaks to us again. Wrong, he said, may at times seem to prevail, but the good already accomplished seem to be overthrown. But forward in the struggle, inspired by the achievements of the past, sustained by a faith that knows no faltering, forward in the struggle. Thank you. Thank you.
Prince of Peace for Martin Luther King. For a child was born to us, government rested upon his shoulders, they called him king. Like his wonderful counselor walked this mission before, sword, not of this earth. How this Prince of Peace walked willingly into battle, and they burst him with bullets for the bullet of his tongue. Your tongue, the greatest weapon you could ever have. How you must not remain silent, yet speak up for those unable to speak up for themselves, O King, Prince of Peace. How they slay you for your words swaddled in skin. How we're just as foolish when we refuse to see our own sin. If my brother's blood calls out to me from the ocean floor, should I not call myself a shark if I turn my naked eye and watch devour, Prince of Peace? How we've come so far, yet still have so far to go. How we've come from boycotts and firearms, marched prejudice out of our souls, took the front seat of every bus that led us to victory, to immigration laws, healthcare acts, right versus left wing, terrorism attacks, brown faces, still clinging across borders, black boys, still swimming in the river of their own blood, mothers, blotting the blood around their bodies. Where is the rest of their body? Veins of their fathers run through them. Yet another daddy didn't come home. Another young soldier on battlefield gone. A child not trained to obey the law. A father not trained to love his son. Lack of assistance. Trapped in a system. Families become caged birds behind metal bars of ignorance. Lack of knowledge. And we look for somewhere to place all of the blame. Yet assumptions of crooked police force no longer black and white but gray, and we still throw daggers of flame. But our war be not of this earth. So our swords need not be of this earth, and we've come so far, yet still have so far to go. How civil rights movement, not just about color of skin, but heart full of grace, soul of love, the only force to transform enemy into friend. My sword, not of this earth. Can we call ourselves lover of people? When we pray for Trayvon, press protest for Mike Brown, yet carry hate for authority so thick in our chest that it grows another body. Have we been hypocritical? How the self cannot be self without other selves. Yet we kill ourselves when we fight each other. O King, Prince of Peace, what part of your dream did we chew into nightmare? Have we turned our swords on each other? Pharaoh kept the slaves fighting among themselves, but when the slaves got together, the end of slavery began. We must learn to fight together. We are in the fight together. Unity where we care for one another beyond where we come from, no matter race or ethnicity. Churches no longer divided by denomination, yet by every word by which we live. Land where human trafficking no longer exists, where families actually stay together, where they are planning for more college degrees for children of color than they are prison systems. Dr. King, you said the important thing about a man is not the color of his skin or the texture of his hair, but the texture and quality of his soul. So teach us how to unfold ourselves in the peacemaker. May we peel back every layer until we shake the weapons of hate from our skin. How there's always more room to grow, mountains to climb, and we shall be reminded that we are overcomers. That the weapons of our warfare not carnal, so we'll use our tongues as weaponry. Use the word as sword to slice the pain out of ourselves and carve courage into our every breath. Until justice rolls down like a river, righteousness like an unfailing stream. All men were created equal. So lift every voice and sing. Stand up for truth. Stand firm in faith, despite how difficult it may feel. Nonviolence, a powerful and just weapon, cuts without wounding, ennobles the man who wields it. It is a sword that heals. It is a sword that heals. Dr. King, you are a sword that healed. Prince of Peace, God of love, you are the sword that heals.